I am being watched. Welcome, everyone, to MailFuzz TV. This is my review of Season 1, Episode 5 of Person of Interest. It is called Judgment, and it is about a judge whose son is kidnapped, and there's a whole bunch of reasons why, but we'll get into all that. But this again, it offers a slightly different type of plot. This is the first time where, well, not the first time, but this is definitely the most innocent a victim of whatever crime is going on that is being intervened is, right? So we have a child who's kidnapped, and not that his father is like got shades of grey. In fact, by the sounds of it, this judge character is pretty by the book. He makes a lot of enemies because he actually is pretty stingent when it comes to the law, and he's very hard on criminals. He's very hard on his decisions. And it sounds like he's a pretty upstanding guy in that sense. And there's a backstory about how his wife died of I want to say cancer. If it wasn't cancer, it was something else. But it was his wife died of illness, and it's just him and his son now. So there's kind of like a purely sympathetic victim in this episode. Not that there's been no sympathetic victims before, but this is a very clear cut. Like, we're going full sympathy here. And the villains are villains, and they're purely villains, right? There's a couple of notable guest stars in this who I could never have told you their names, but I instantly recognized two people in this. The judge himself is played by David Costable, and he is Gale from Breaking Bad. And it was bugging me for a little bit in this episode. I was like, I know this guy's face. Who is this? I know this guy. But that's who he is. He was a chemist in Breaking Bad. And then the other guy that I recognized is sort of the main bad guy from the Eastern European gang who's on the phone to the judge a lot, telling, hey, do this or your son's dead. That guy. Equally, I was like, who's this guy? He looks familiar. And it turns out he's the observer from Fringe. So pretty, like, they're not like massive characters on those shows, but they're notable, and like they're from two shows that I really like, and they're both in here. So I thought that was a fun little bit of connective tissue. But I'll get into all the main plot. But as per usual, the most exciting stuff in a show like this to me is the ongoing stuff with the characters, our main characters who we are developing as we go throughout. And once again, this episode has that. No flashbacks this time, but we do have, again, a little bit of that playfulness with Reese and Finch, and Reese maybe trying to figure out more stuff about Finch and who he is, and Finch kind of like calling it a mail off. The episode, after the little tease, it opens with him going to this little diner where Finch is going to hand off like the information of who they're looking after next, in this case the judge. But there's a little bit of dialogue here where Reese says, oh, what do you recommend here? And Finch is like, that's not going to work. And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm just asking for a recommendation. And he's like, no. You're trying to deduce if I eat here often. And if I eat here often, you might try and use that to figure out where I live, because it might be close by. And again, it's showing that they don't have any sort of trust really built up yet. And it pays off nicely at the end. And I think it pays off because it's just this little gesture, right? It's just this little nice thing where Reese, we've talked about since episode 1 how he needed a purpose and he needed this. And I think by the end of this episode, this, like I said, this being a clear cut, there's someone who is purely sympathetic that we can root for saving. And Reese feels like he's done a good thing by the end of the episode. So when he comes back to this diner at the end and he thinks he's going to get another job from Finch, because he hides it in the menu the first time. This time, Finch, importantly, Reese thanks him for giving him a job. So he's actually thankful at the end of this episode. He shows some genuine gratitude because he's realizing that he does have a purpose and that he has done something of value and he feels good about it. Because Reese is a character who's constantly plagued and tortured by what he is. In fact, the very last episode was about him, like, I lost a part of myself when I became a killer, and I'm not going to let someone else do that to themselves. And in this episode, it's like he just does something that's no shades of grey. He can just feel good about it, and he thanks Finch for putting him in that position. And Finch's response to this is to just offer a little gesture, calling back to the start of the episode, where he actually makes a recommendation. He recommends the Eggs Benedict, and he even adds on the important part, I've had them many times. And it's just this little olive branch of, okay, I'll trust you with what seems like an innocent fact that no one else would consider a big gesture. But given the context of what this episode sets up, it's actually a big deal that he offers that willingly at the end of the episode. And it makes Reese smile. More so when he opens the menu and there's not even a photo in there. It's just the menu. I mean, I can't get on board with the recommendation. I despise eggs in all of their forms. Thank you very much. But it's a sweet scene that progresses their relationship a little bit, and it's these little things here that I really appreciate. And the main plot of the episode is entertaining and thrilling enough. I think the other part of the main plot that is very interesting to me is that as it's going on, and it's okay, how do we find this kidnapped son? And Reese, after the son's kidnapped, and because at the start of the episode they're following the judge. Okay, he's probably going to be targeted because he's put someone away or because whatever. But it turns out that his son's kidnapped, and Reese tries to get to the son in time when they realize this, and he puts up a good fight, but he gets shot, and he feels like he's failed, and that kind of propels. But after that moment, he actually just goes to the judge and says, look, your son's been kidnapped. You can't go to the cops. You can't go to the FBI. I can help you. And is in direct contact and giving him advice and stepping in when he can. Like, he's directly contacting with this judge throughout the episode. Obviously he's talked to and interacted with the people, the persons of interest, for lack of a better term, throughout the previous episodes. But this one was a lot more genuine right off the bat. There was no period where he was pretending to be a stranger or someone else. As soon as this kid's in danger, he steps in, screw that bollocks. I'm not going to tell him who I am. I'm not going to give him too much information. But he just steps in and says, look, I can help. I do this kind of thing. Let's get this done. There's no, pussyfooting around, to put it bluntly. So, one of the questions that comes up from this from Finch, who's obviously he's a worrier, I think it's fair to say. Finch worries about things. He says, well, what about this judge though? Like, when this is all done, if we get the kid back and we solve all this, like, this judge asking questions about who we are and what we do isn't that good, right? That's not good for our longevity here. And sure enough, at the end of the episode, when it's all said and done, and Reese has saved the day, the son has been returned safely, and Reese goes to visit the judge one last time, and he's just out playing with his son. He's playing football, or soccer for the Americans. He interacts with the judge, and you get the impression that he's here to kind of come back to this question, okay, what now that he kind of knows I exist in some form. He doesn't know my name, he doesn't know a lot of details, but he knows that I'm out here doing stuff. And the judge effectively says, I don't know who you are, or what exactly you're doing, but eventually someday people will become aware of it. They will. It's not an if, it's a when. And when they do, even someone like me probably can't protect you because you're going to upset a lot of people. And what I actually loved about this is that as soon as he said that, my thought was, this is someone that might pop up later in a small role to help. The idea that Reese doing these good deeds will eventually pay off, and there'll be a lot of people in the city. Unlike at the start of the show when he literally had no one to look out for him, there might actually be a group of people that he's helped throughout the course of all these adventures that eventually, when he needs to rely on other people, they'll be there for him. Not because he's forcing them, not because he specifically did it for a favor, but just because they want to help him. And that's actually quite a heartwarming idea. And what's great about it is that not only did I think that as soon as, even though the judge is saying, I don't think I can help, the implication there is that he would want to. That's the thing. If you read between the lines, him saying, when all this comes crashing down and it hurts inside, more of the Hulk Hogan theme music, I can't help you. I don't think I can help you. But the implication is that he would want to. He would want to try and be a helpful hand to him. And, I was actually surprised in the very next scene when Reese goes to see Finch at the end. He actually says what I just thought. He says, oh, he said one day he might even help us. And Finch is like, no, I listened to the conversation, and that's not what he said. And Reese is like, I read between the lines. But I think that moment played really true to me because it's exactly what I thought. The way he said it, that's exactly what I thought, is that this actually might be someone who can help us in the future, especially given his position as a judge who's making these decisions and all that stuff. So I thought that was a really nice little potential setup. I do wonder if like there's a group of people that he's helped throughout the season that might help him at the end of the season, or even further down the line. Maybe this is the real long game of even beyond that. So that's good. We'll come back to the main kidnapping stuff in a bit. Obviously, Carter and Fusco, they're together now in the precinct, and she is suspicious of him because she kind of catches him maybe looking at her files at one point. And you know, it more directly ties in like what Fusco sort of does with her ends up helping Reese solve the kidnapping case at a certain point. But the big character beat here for me, other than just, you know, them sort of building a camaraderie and working together, is there's a scene where Fusco is called by Reese to go and meet him, and he does so outside. He says he's going to get coffee, then they go and they talk in line. And this is Reese, you know, saying, hey, there's been this kidnapping, I need you to run ballistics on this bullet, so on and so on. And it's, you know, it's typically just making Fusco do stuff for him. The two things that I noted here, the fun one is that Reese literally Batmans out of the scene. I mean, we see him as the audience walk out of frame, but Fusco keeps talking, then turns around and he's gone. That is a Jim Gordon and Batman interaction. That's just what that is. But the main thing here is, you know, and I've been saying since episode 1 that Fusco, you know, like it feels like this idea that there's a potential for redemption, or that he is, you know, he has good qualities. This is kind of the first real, like, actuality of that, which is he starts actually suggesting things to try and help find the kid. He starts trying to, I can't remember the exact line, but he says something to try and actually advance things, like he gives a shit. And Reese says something, you know, like, oh, you know, why do you care, or something to that effect. And Fusco very quickly says, look, despite what I have done, this is an innocent kid that's in danger. And this, I think, rings true because, you know, we've seen Fusco with his own kid, and he felt threatened when he was questioned by gangsters or whoever it was next to his own kid. So it feels like true that he would empathize with that anyway, even if you don't believe it in the grander, he's just, you know, he still believes in saving innocent children way. I'm sure he does, but even if you're cynical and don't believe that, you can actually directly think about how he might personally relate to the threat of that happening. But he's like, look, this is still an innocent kid, and I'm still a cop. Like, I still actually want to save people who are in trouble. He's not like, as much as he was taking money and he was doing dodgy things, he's not necessarily, it doesn't mean he doesn't care about innocent people who are hurt or in danger or whatever. So it's a little thing, and Reese isn't really ready to listen to him yet. He literally walks away as he's saying this little monologue, which is a little funny, of course, but it's the idea that he's not going to entertain Fusco at this point. But I suspect that at some point he will have to maybe learn this about Fusco, and Fusco may have to prove himself in some ways. But I thought that was an important little detail. I also appreciate, just on sticking on these Fusco and Carter, that Carter, like she's getting very good at just kind of like, you know, the nanny for the kid was killed, right? It turns out she was killed in her own apartment, probably tortured to get the alarm code for the judge's house so they could kidnap the son. And Reese finds the body and he's talking to Finch, and he intentionally dials 911 so the police will come and find the body. And we see later on there's police there at the crime scene. Carter comes in, and there's a witness saying, you know, this 6'2" man in a nice suit was leaving just after the 911 call. And the other cop's like, so do you think this guy you're looking for, do you think he's the shooter? And this cop's almost excited that it's like an open shut case. And Carter's like, no, actually, I think he dialed 911. And, you know, she's accurate. That's exactly what happened. As soon as he says no one said anything on the phone call, it was just dialed and left, you know, sitting. That immediately just like gives her this clue. And sure enough, when Reese does save the day and he takes down the bad guys, he actually, again, does a very Batman thing. Reese leaves the bad guys tied up and gagged with all of their dirty money in this location, which Fusco has tracked them down to with Carter. So when they come in ready, on edge, the guns are out, they're thinking they might be up for a fight, and they're all just tied up, and it's like they've been gift wrapped. They've been gift wrapped for the police with all this dirty money. Even evidence of the accounts and where the money comes and goes from has been handed to a lawyer. Like, it's all been just handed to them, and it's the sort of thing where up until now, like, Reese, obviously from Carter's perspective, Reese has stepped in and seemingly saved some people here or there, but now, like, they're like, this is a big deal. He's effectively taken down a branch of this big gang and gift wrapped a lot of evidence for them. Now, whether or not they'll be able to make all this stick, I'm sure the show's never going to get into that, but the waves that he's making feel like they're getting bigger. And it kind of ties into what the judge was saying about how, people are going to start noticing that someone like you is out here doing things like this. And this is exactly the sort of bigger play that's going to start maybe getting attention, that there is someone out there, and maybe there'll be a reputation of a man in a suit, like, intervening in things or stopping bad guys. And that's exciting. It's exciting to see it kind of escalate in that way, where it's like making a stance because they believe in something, I guess. Not that they specifically go after this gang, of course. Like, all of their cases are sort of fed to them by the machine, but like, as we go through, it would be interesting to see like how bigger this is, and when we get to a threat that might actually be too tough, at least to begin with, or someone that he can't just like be the badass with and come out with a wisecracking one-liner like he usually does. And these one-liners are I'll give Jim Caviezel this. The way he delivers some of the dry one-liners, like, there's a very fine line where I think if the delivery was slightly to the left or to the right, they'd probably come off as lame as they kind of are. But he kind of just rides this line very well, where at the very least after a few episodes, I'm just kind of enjoying them for what they are. And I guess credit where credit is due for that. So yeah, I mean, the main plot, just to sort of go a bit into more of this, so there's a tease at the start of the episode of this hit and run attack on a security camera, and it turns out that's what this she wasn't a stockbroker, she was like a banker, she was like a tech worker who designed like anti-money laundering tech for bank systems, right? So she's a techie, but she's got to deal with this mob to turn off the system effectively without anyone knowing, so that all of their dirty money can be laundered in a small window every day, with no one being the wiser. And basically, she did just get drunk and drive someone down, and she needs help. She wants to be let off. So her gangster friends, and I say friends loosely, they don't seem to like each other very much, but they need her for all the money laundering, have kidnapped the judge's son so that he will just like throw out the case or make sure she gets acquitted. And it sets up that he's this hard-ass lawyer, or sorry, judge, who cares about the law and tries to go by the book. So it does feel like when he starts making weird decisions in the courtroom, when he's trying to sort of go along with this plan, that the other lawyers and stuff are like, they're confused by how he's acting, because they expect him to act a certain way. They're used to how he is, and that stuff's interesting to watch a little bit. I think the big thing for me with all of this is, like, I think I was expecting a swerve, where maybe the judge did have some dirt or something, like something maybe he did once in his past that's come back to haunt him. And I think I was actually relieved that it never did that. Like, it wouldn't have been necessarily terrible depending on what it was. Like, it might have fit into whatever themes they wanted to do. But I actually, sometimes no swerve is the best swerve. In a weird way, where it's in this show, like every story so far, and they've all been very different swerves to its credit. Like, I've never felt like they've repeated the same thing. But all of the people of interest, they've all had a swerve of like, okay, this one we thought was the victim, but they're not. Or this one we thought was the victim, but they're more a sympathetic revenge story. Or, this one is the victim, but the perpetrator is surprising. They've all kind of twisted and turned at a certain point. it was actually almost refreshing, and it was probably just at the right time in the season as well. After 4 episodes of building up, if you want to call it a formula, you can, but they basically did not do that element of it, and it made it feel oddly kind of refreshing that this was just a good person who was being targeted and needed help. Which again plays into why Reese, I think, can feel just good about what he's done at the end of the episode. There's always going to be more shades of grey characters. I'm sure we'll probably have one next episode. But it is good once in a while to have a clear cut good person to save. It's a balance, and it's, it plays with our expectations a little bit in a good way, but sometimes it's nice just to actually play the story straight, and I think it did that. And all the various little things they do, the teases of like, your son's going to die, and they take a photo of him like with a gun pointing at him, or they let him hear his son. We've seen these types of things in other shows well enough. As I suppose the other stuff they talk about with this is that Reese's interrogation methods with some of the gangster members that he finds. Like he keeps one guy in the back of the car in the boot, or sorry, the trunk for the Americans, and basically just leaves him in there for a long time, and eventually throws him in a cheeseburger, but doesn't actually untie his hands. But then he gets a second guy, the one who notably killed the nanny, who is a sympathetic victim. Going back to what I just said about like not just doing the swerve because we almost expect it. Like at one point, Reese even says, "Hey, could your nanny be in on this? Like, is she a bad guy?" And the guy's like, "No, that can't be possible. She was great with him." And I think my TV rating alarm bells were going off of like, she probably is. She's probably like her boyfriend's in the gang or something. It was almost refreshing when she just turned up dead, and it's like, no, she's an innocent victim too. She was a perfectly like I actually, this sounds crazy, but I really love that everyone, like the judge, his son, the nanny, all like they were all wholesome. They were all perfectly nice, good people. There was no twist that any of them were bad, and I actually really appreciated that. But yeah, he gets the second gang member with the long hair who killed the nanny. And he's got them both in the trunk of the car, and basically he does that moment. I don't mean to keep comparing it to Batman things, but this is actually not a Batman comparison. This is a Joker comparison. In The Dark Knight, there's that moment where Joker says we're going to have tryouts, and he puts like a stick out for these two guys to fight each other. He basically does that here. The guy that was already in the car for like a day already, he like throws him a knife and says, "Okay, get the name of this guy's boss," because they all work in cells, so they all have different information. And the guy with the long hair is refusing to tell him anything, so he gives the knife to the other guy and goes, he unties him, gives him the knife, and says, "All right, get the name of the boss," and then just closes the boot again. And it's darkly quite funny, I have to say. It plays into his dry humor as well, I would say. But I had a good chuckle at that. And shows that Reese is still willing to do dark things, but it's all in a good cause here. We're saving a child's life, and we have the big standoff later on as well, where it feels like all hope is lost, and that the gang was always intending in killing both the son and the dad once he'd done what they wanted. The woman is found not guilty by the jury because the judge basically like poo-poos all the evidence, even evidence that seems, he's basically. I think the defense attorney at one point says objection a few times because the cop that's on the stand, and he's talking about like seeing the car, and he says there was blood on the car, and the other lawyer objects to that and says that's conjecture. So he rephrases it as there was red substance on the car that could be identified as blood, potentially, and he still objects that, and every time the judge just keeps saying sustained. But it's like, I don't know, that feels pretty fair. The dude's being as diplomatic as possible with how he describes what was clearly blood on the front of this car, without breaking out a DNA like test kit and just checking what the substance is on a scientific level. But anyway, that's the whole thing with him interfere in the case. But we get this big standoff, and Reese does just straight up have to go into action man mode, where he grabs the woman who was acquitted and uses her as like a hostage, and clearly he's got an extra information from her. He's already had information from Finch and stuff, and he says, hey, all of your money's been drained, all your clients, because it turns out they launder money for like other bad people all over the country or the world. Like, they've all had their money drained out of like your system. This is all on you. Like, if you don't give the son over, like, all of this is I'm going to leak all this information. They're all going to come after you. And the bad guy still tries to like just get into a gunfight, and Reese just has to full on go into action man mode, where he shoots like the 3 henchmen really quickly and sort of grabs the son, shields him, and shoots the last guy. And it's a fun little moment. It's in the rain. The mood's quite good. It feels like a big conclusion. It feels like a heartwarming moment where he turns to the judge and says, is he okay? And he says, yeah. So it's like, okay, the episode succeeded in building up that Reese cares about saving this son. Obviously, you can sympathize with the judge wanting his son back. That makes sense. But throughout the episode, and this is the important part, is that it makes it clear that this matters to Reese. That Reese needs to save this kid. He feels he cares about it, and therefore it matters even more to us as the audience because he's our main character. And it adds this extra weight. So it's not just that you're happy that the judge has got his son back at the end. You're happy that Reese felt he needed to succeed at this, and he did. He needed this win. And that's why we feel better about it. That's why we feel so thrilled at the end when he pulls it off. So, yeah. No, a good episode, if that wasn't clear. Obviously, I think I might have liked the last episode a little bit more because, like, the saving someone's soul because they want to kill someone, that obviously had a lot more interesting shades a grey to it. But I think this was the perfect counterbalance to that episode because it was much more black and white, and you could just feel good at the end about what he did, and he feels good about it, which is great because it syncs up with how we can look at it as the audience and how the character feels about it. The writing in this show does have these smart touches, which you don't get in procedural TV typically. Not that this is straight up procedural, but obviously it's very procedural right now because we're doing these very simple case of the week. Oh, I say simple. They're not really simple, but you know what I mean. So, credit should be given for that. I think there is these little smart touches that, even though it doesn't feel super serialized yet, there's a lot in there that is rewarding you if you are watching in a serialized manner, where you are paying attention to the details and you're paying attention to the character progression. And I think 5 episodes in, I felt rewarded for it pretty much every episode, that I'm thinking about it more than just the base level of entertainment. And that's why it's worth watching and talking about, I guess. So, yeah, there you go. That is my thoughts on episode 5 of Person of Interest. Let me know what you thought of the episode in the comments, and of course, hit the like button. It does help a lot. And let me know that you want to keep more of this coming. And of course, you can support all the content over at patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. That's what even lets me do this stuff as frequently as I do. So please go and consider doing that. But that is me. So thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV. Have you got any vanilla?